Welcome to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates, your source for current affairs in Tobago, Trinidad, and the region, with the perfect conversations to complement your morning routine. I am Candace Jackson, and let's get started with the news in 90 seconds. Political leader of the Tobago Council of the PNM, Ansel Dennis, stated his disapproval of the announcement of a new political party being led by Chief Secretary Pali Augustine. Dennis believes that the formation of a new party will not change the current pattern of poor leadership, arrogance, and dishonesty in governance. He also described the timing of the new party as obscene and insulting while they are in the middle of their term in office. Meanwhile, Dennis said the PNM remains the only option for governance in Tobago and indicated the party is working to ensure they return to power whenever the next THA elections are called. Meanwhile, today, a total of 18,889 students from across the country are expected to take the secondary entrance assessment examinations. The exams are scheduled to begin at 8:30 this morning. Minister of Education, Nayan Gaspi-Dolly, urged all students to do their best and know that their best is good enough. The minister also stated that all is in place for the smooth administering of the exam across the country. Meanwhile, the Division of Education, Research and Technology has not released any official information on the number of students taking the exam in Tobago, nor on the arrangements made to facilitate it. And nationally, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley encouraged faith-based organizations to keep doing their part in instilling morals and values into people. However, he wants them to do more. Dr. Rowley said the government spent a lot of money on developing the country's education system, but religion has a significant role in the state's commitment to providing that education. He said the absence of good parenting, religious bodies, and in the absence of good parenting, religious bodies need to fill the gaps and teach children moral values. And that was the news in 90 seconds. And just by way of a public service announcement from the Tobago Festivals Commission, and they are wishing to advise the public that today, Wednesday, 29th March 2023, only today only, persons can get $100 off the Tobago Jazz Experience 2023 tickets. This applies to all tickets for all events. The promotion runs from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Shaw Park Complex in Tobago and the Queen's Hall in Scarborough. Shaw Park Complex will facilitate cash transactions only, while Queen's Hall will conduct both cash and card, links and credit card transactions. And of course, persons are also advised that the payday special is limited to 4 tickets per person. And for further information, the commission can be contacted at 639-4441 or 612-013. I think that's a number missing in that number. But anyways, so that's your public service announcement for this morning. Of course, this morning is about SCA as well. And I know the students are ready. They're probably already seated for their exam. And we want to wish all the students best of luck from the Tobago Updates team. And, you know, it's going to work out well no matter what happens in the exam. I think we put a little bit too much pressure on our students at that age, but that's a conversation I'm going to have a little bit later in the program. But for now, we are turning to some politics. So joining me on set is former minority leader, Mr. Ashworth Jack, who is here with us. Good morning and welcome to you, sir. How are you doing?
Good morning, Candace. Good morning to Tobago and the rest of the viewing and listening public. Let me also take the opportunity to wish the students who are doing C exams today, all the best, remain calm. You can't learn anything new today.
Certainly, you can't learn anything new.
You just have to do what you have learned over the last 7 years.
Yes. And, you know, I mean, when you think about it, it's like I remember writing common entrance and just wanted it to be over with. I think my parents were more stressed out than I was. I just wanted it to be done. So.
I could attest to that.
Yes.
When my daughters did common entrance, I think I did common entrance more than they did.
Mm-hmm.
It was so stressful, but and parents need to put a bit less pressure on the charges.
Yes, and certainly a conversation we could develop at a later point. But returning to what happened last week at the Assembly Legislature. Now, for those of you who may not know, but what happened last week, they were unable to proceed with a sitting last week because there was no clerk of the house present. So, and according to deputy presiding officer, Mr. Joel Sampson, now, without a presiding officer, according to the standing orders, they were not able to proceed.
No, without a clerk.
Without a clerk,
Yeah.
They were not able to proceed. So, Mr. Jack, would you be able to give us a perspective on that and just sort of clarify that law or that rule a little bit more?
I think
okay, no, wait. Before we do that, we are going to be running the clip now. All right, so let's have the clip and then we're going to talk about it a little bit.
Honorable members, the delay in starting today's sitting was owing to the fact that the clerk of the House did not turn up for duty today, and that was done without any notification to the presiding officer or the deputy presiding officer. There exists no current deputy clerk of the House, notwithstanding the fact that this position was created by Cabinet Note number 2886 on the 14th of October 2004. Further, the Executive Council, on a note dated February 14, 2023, approved the creation of a contract position of Assistant Clerk of the House, but that is yet to be actioned. At present, no one is legally authorized to serve as Clerk of the House. The THA Act 40 of 1996, Section 65(1) says that the Assembly shall hold an ordinary meeting as often as its business may require, and at least once every month. Additionally, Section 67 of the THA Act 40 of 1996 says that the clerk shall keep in proper form a record of the proceedings of each meeting of the Assembly. In the absence of the clerk, no one is so legally authorized to keep a proper recording of the proceedings of today's sitting. Both the law and the standing orders are silent on what should happen should the clerk of the House be absent from a sitting. The standing orders of the THA requires that the announcement of the absence of the presiding officer be announced by the clerk of the House while the deputy is invited to act. Out of the abundance of caution, today I convene the sitting to satisfy the requirement of meeting every third Thursday of the month. However, I do not wish to proceed with this sitting any further with the absence of the clerk of the House and with the lack of clear legal advice on the matter. I am not a lawyer, and I do not wish to pretend that even the steps I am taking today is legal. In this regard, I apologize to this House on behalf of the Assembly Legislature. At this juncture, I will call this House to adjourn for the remainder of this day. Notice of resumption will be given by the Clerk of the House in accordance with the law as soon as is possible. The Executive Council business, as well as oral questions and Chief Secretary questions, will now happen at the next sitting. The members that wrote notifying of their absence today will have their absence duly noted for whatever recording of this sitting that we have. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. So viewers, there you have it. Just what happened at the House last week, Thursday, while they sat. So, Mr. Jack, could we get your perspective on what happened last week?
It's interesting. I think what happened last week kind of showed up a lot of weaknesses in how the Assembly Legislature operates.
And the standing orders.
Right? No, well, not really the standing orders. The standing orders is silent on some matters, but if there are a number of other things that had taken place, then there was no need. Mm-hmm. And let me just kind of clarify, because I like to qualify things that I say. First thing first, what came out there was a lack of communication, effective communication between the clerk and the presiding and deputy presiding officer. People need to understand that the clerk of the House is the advisor to the presiding officer. Mm. In that, when a presiding officer comes in, they might come in with absolutely no knowledge of the standing orders and stuff like that. And therefore, the clerk is the one who then provides guidance. I am quite sure, or I'm hoping, that the clerk could have known the presiding officer was going to be out. And therefore, the deputy presiding officer had to sit. And if there was another school of thought, then it was the responsibility of the clerk to have something in writing left for the deputy president and said, this can proceed based on this. But the problem that we continue to have in Tobago is that we don't understand that the clerk of the house is a specialized function. By that I mean that the clerk of the house must understand the standing orders, they must understand the act, they must understand the Senate standing order, which the THA, the standing order say if the THA standing order is silent on something, then it goes to the Senate standing orders. And you also have to have a very good working knowledge of the May's parliamentary procedure, which is like the Bible of parliamentary procedure for the Commonwealth. And that means that in order to be anchored with all these, it calls for a number of training sessions. And the question is, have the clerk had adequate training? If not, why not? Have the clerk availed herself or himself of adequate training? If not, why not? Because something like this, in my 16 years, there have never been a time when both the clerk of the house, or the clerk as we like to call it, and the presiding officers absent at the same time. And so that means that there was some communication as to how that happens.
Now, I also want to address something in that. Now, of course, people are entitled to days off. And Mr. Duke made that argument, after the proceeding where he criticized the way that the presiding officer and the deputy presiding officer handled the situation, and he stated that, there should be something in place if the clerk of the house is not there. And the excuse that, that there should have been a deputy presiding clerk, or that the fact that there isn't a deputy clerk, raised some concerns. So what is your perspective on that one?
People, we have stopped splitting hairs and playing smart with foolishness.
Okay.
I fully agree that the issue of a deputy clerk is something that should have been addressed. And if you listen to the deputy presiding officer, the deputy would have given dates and stuff that was supposed to be put in place.
Yes.
Since 2004, 19 years, or 18 going on 19 years, because it was October 2004, the cabinet created the position of deputy. It was never actioned.
So then back in the time that you were in the assembly...
The assembly never had a deputy clerk.
Wow. So then was there any sort of provisions if the clerk was not able to be present?
And that's the thing. There was always a sort of a dedication to duty by the clerk of the house and stuff like that. So even, listen, this thing could have been avoided with a 10-second announcement, 10 seconds. I fully agree that the clerk is entitled to days off, but I also say that the issue of how good manners operate would have solved this problem really, really easy. But the fact that it happened, I am quite sure have shown up a whole new set of things. And I want to kind of delve into some of those. The assembly legislature have never been properly staffed, and that needs to be done. Because if the assembly legislature was properly staffed, then something like this would not have occurred, because there would have been 2 or 3 layers of persons who could have held that position. The parliament doesn't have just one clerk in it, have a number of clerks. So if that happens, there's somebody always to step in. And then the question is, who does the clerk report to? Because if the clerk is not coming to work on a day that is the most important day of the month for the legislature, and there's no communication, it means that the person in the legislature is not seen as the clerk's boss. And so my question is, does the clerk report to the chief administrator? And if that is the case, it is totally wrong.
Now, do you think that there is any political division? Is it indicative of politics playing a role in there?
I wouldn't want to speculate on it, right? I wouldn't, because I think that sometimes we read too much into stuff.
Okay.
So I don't want to speculate on that. But I'm saying the democracy is made up of 3 arms of government. It is the legislature, it is the judiciary, and it is the executive. And there should never be any crossing of any of them. It means that the final boss of the clerk should be the presiding officer. The chief administrator is supposed to have absolutely no part to play in the running of the assembly legislature. Other than that, there is not the separation of power. And so all these things have to be taken into consideration. The other thing is that why in 2004 the cabinet would have set up the position of deputy clerk. 19 years after, the position was never filled. And then, of course, I also heard the deputy presiding officer speak about the 14th of February that the Executive Council took a decision to hire on contract,
yes.
which is laudable, right? And of course, it's a close time. It's almost like they were so foreseeing the danger. But things like those need to be dealt with. So the question is, if the clerk, left to me, I love that. But I understand the deputy presiding officer because he read the law, he read the standing orders, and he was erring, as he said, out of an abundance of caution.
Yes.
And so if they did sit, somebody could look at the same law and say, but it doesn't make any provision.
And then that sit-in would have been deemed
then
illegal. Yeah.
You know, so you do your damn, you don't your damn. And the way to fix that is to put the necessary things in place so that you don't have that kind of problem.
Now, why is it that the cabinet needs to approve the appointment of a deputy presiding officer?
Because it's a public service position. And that is why the Executive Council went ahead and approved a position on contract, because they have the power to do that, but they cannot create a public service position. And again, I'm glad you raised that, because it speaks to the fact that Tobago is too dependent on Port of Spain for even a simple thing as creating a position in the Tobago public service. And it's more than that, you know. The understaffing or the inadequate staffing of the Assembly legislature need to be looked at in another light. Today or tomorrow, the bill becomes an act of Parliament that gives Tobago autonomy. The first place that is going to be impacted is the Assembly legislature. Because you know how lawmaking powers, you have a number of things. What are you going to do? Start a mad rush to find people, and where would you find the requisite people for that? And so there need to be a hard look. It's unfortunate that almost 27 years of Act number 40, there have not been a comprehensive review of the Assembly legislature, even with all the hullabaloo about autonomy and all that. And it tells me that people wasn't serious. Now,
for that bill that is before Parliament at this moment, does that have any provisions or anything that would allow the legislature itself to have more autonomy?
No, but the bill doesn't have to speak to legislature having more autonomy. How the system of Westminster system of democracy works is that there's a separation of powers, and that is all that is needed. A separation of powers that says there's the legislature, there's the judiciary, and there's the executive. Co-equal branches of government. And so the Act doesn't have to tell you the legislature have more powers. The very fact that we deal with this kind of democracy tells you that these are the powers you have, and there should never be a crossing over of them, you know. And then so as I said, you know, the presiding officer should be the final authority just as the chief secretary is in the executive, and just as the chief justice is in the judiciary. And so the question is that so? And if not, why not? Right? And if you look at what's happened then, you ask yourself, if this is the case, what's the situation with committee working? And committees cannot work and have never worked.
And then, I mean, I know that was a complaint, even from Mr. Watson Duke himself, that, you know, we have these committee sittings, or supposedly have these committee sittings, and we don't even have a sort of accountability in the same way that we have in Parliament.
There's not the necessary staff to staff them, and that's because the Assembly legislature is grossly understaffed and have been understaffed for 26.5 years.
Now, who is responsible for making sure that the Assembly legislature is properly staffed?
Well, it's the work of the executive and stuff like that to look at it and say, listen, this is what makes a democracy. And this is what we need to do to build out the staff as it's done at every division in the Tobago House of Assembly. And so I'm listening to people commenting and I'm saying, but you know, people don't understand that we 27 years behind based on the Act. And then if you look at it, but of course, we also have to be mindful that when the Act number 40 was passed and we started to tweak with stuff, and that's why people need to be very careful. People speak from a position of emotion and not information. And so people, I remember when Mr. Charles became Chief Secretary, the Act says he must have official vehicle, adequate security. When he bought a vehicle, the same people would make an outcry, he playing big, you know, but it's his entitlement.
Yes.
When he said that you must have adequate security, it's what are you doing with a car, with a siren? It's like, come on, people. Now it has become the norm. And of course, even now, I'm sure the Chief Secretary changes his car tomorrow, you're going to hear, what? They buy a new car? You're the Chief Secretary kind of break down on the road, and even this one vehicle that carries the Chief Secretary. Craziness. So if the Chief Secretary vehicle gets into an accident or a mechanical problem, we're supposed to come out and flag down a ride on this side of the road, that kind of thing. So every time, people have to be brave. People have to understand that you have to push the envelope. And you have to see what happens in the rest of the world, in the rest of the Commonwealth. And that is why there are CPA conferences on an annual basis. And I have been privileged to go to a number of CPA conferences all over the world. And so I have made myself very, very anchored with how the system works, how democracies work. I like the Australian system, really sweet and nice. You know, there are a number of those that could be looked at. And that is why, to come back to the issue of the specialization of the position, you cannot take someone who was, let's say, a accounting officer or an HR person in the Assembly and bring them into the legislature and expect them to be able to effectively run the legislature because they don't have the requisite training. And even if you do, for the first year or year and a half, you're going to lose that professionalism because, and it's no fault of the office holder. It's the fact that because of the specialized training, that officer have to sit down every day, every night, just learning.
And studying.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
no,
it's unfair
but how do we fix this? I mean, we're here now, so how do we fix it?
By making the legislature what it should be, a separate entity, and by having people within the legislature promoted to the position of clerk and stuff like that, because they would, over years and stuff, they will be able to, by practice, by training, they will be able to have the necessary accord.
All right. Now, now we're probably getting close to wrapping up the conversation now. But before we go, I just also want to get your perspective on the formation of a new political party. You know, there were some concerns being raised about the timing and so on, but...
There's never a good time to do anything. I think, you know, I've always said, people get involved in other people's business too much. I don't understand how that becomes the concern of anybody in any other political organization. That is not your business. Mind your own business, fix your own business. You know, a blind man with a board glasses could have seen a new political party was going to happen. When 13 of your 14 sitting assembly people resign from, what do you think will happen? You know, so that's not my business. The thing is that, and I don't pretend to think that it should happen now or happen a year. I think that maybe part of the concern is that they have given themselves so much time to put things together. Wait until the last minute and hustle and say, oh, you see, they're disorganized. But concerned about that at all.
In other words, it was inevitable
Of course.
and it needed to happen.
Of course, it had to happen. Based on what had transpired last year, with the resignation of those members, it was going to happen. And not only that it was a secret, it was said it will happen. And so now that it's happened, that is not my business. I don't know if anybody.
And any expectations ahead of the 4th?
I've learned, and this is one of the maxims by which I live. Expect nothing, and you will not be disappointed.
Certainly. All right, I guess that's a good point to head off into a break. I want to thank you, Mr. Jack, for being on with us and for sharing us your perspective on what's been happening within our political space.
Thanks for having me.
All right, viewers, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some more discussions.
Let's go, go. It's a brand new morning, rise up to a brand new dawning as the passion starts.